y'all, it's your host, Tori Kruse. Welcome to Talk Y'all to Me, your red carpet insider, your friend behind the mic, and the girl behind the scenes connecting fans, artists, and stories that matter. Most of all, a lover of real, honest conversations. Here on Talk Y'all to Me, we pull back the curtain with country artists, industry insiders, faith-forward creators, and everyday leaders, talking about what it really takes to show up, lead with heart, and stay true to you. So whether you're figuring it out, think you've already got it figured out, or if you're just here to learn from the best and keep a pulse on the country scene, this is your spot. So lean in, turn it up, and let's talk, y'all. Hey y'all, welcome back to Talk Y'all to Me. I'm your host, Tori Kruse, and if you have ever watched a reality TV show or maybe a music competition show, this episode is definitely going to interest you. I am really excited to bring Lee Metzger on Talk Y'all to Me today. We're going to peel back the curtain of what a TV producer actually does behind the scenes, how he got into the industry, and so much more. So without further ado, welcome to Talk Y'all to Me, Lee Metzger.
Thanks for having me, Tori.
All right, I'm excited to dive in because one of the coolest things is that you've done work on some entertainment shows called The Voice, maybe just a small one. Also The Road on CBS that just recently aired. And I have had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of the country artists who were on The Road. And so this is a really cool, full circle moment to also have the executive producer behind all this. Let's peel back the curtain and see what all these artists are talking about as well. So it's a really neat perspective. Take us back first before we dive into these really cool shows that you've had the honor of producing. Take us back to just how you even got into this industry.
Well, I moved out to LA to be a musician and played guitar in a lot of bands and did all that. And at one point, somewhere along the way, I decided there's probably a better way to earn a living after playing clubs for a long time. Went back to school and ended up getting my master's in screenwriting from AFI, American Film Institute. And that just started down the path of, I started working in MTV and, I had it because I had a music background, it was pretty useful. So I was writing music game shows for them and directing, making the video and working on anything. You showed up at MTV back then with a pulse, you got to work. And then that led to, I got a gig on Big Brother as a producer. And then that led to a show called Rockstar in Excess with Mark Burnett. And it was great for me because hardly anyone who worked on the show knew anything about playing music. They were just making shows. So I was able to work with the band and Dave Navarro and then worked with Mark Burnett for a number of years. And then The Voice came along. And so by that point, I was a showrunner and executive producer. And so I worked on The Voice for the first 6.5, 7 years. That's where I met Blake. And, but during that whole process, I've worked on tons and tons of music shows. And so being able to talk to musicians and understanding what they're going through, not just from I'm a TV guy, but I've stood on stage, I've played in front of people, I've played tons of venues and all that. So I understand what they're going through. And at the same time, being able to talk to artists like Blake Shelton or Adam Levine or Keith Urban from the standpoint of helping them talk to artists in a way that viewers can understand. Because sometimes it gets a little inside baseball. And I think audiences have evolved for the last 10, 15 years, seeing that sort of conversation. But when we're first starting these shows, audience don't know the difference between a key or pitch or, how to choose the song or how to connect to a lyric. And so helping those artists say that in a way that audiences at home who know nothing can play along and watch and be able to enjoy the process.
That's interesting. So it sounds like you've worked with Blake Shelton, and the judges, right, of The Voice. And then are you also working with the artists? Are you the liaison essentially between the two?
Yeah, on a show, well, both the Road and The Voice are a little bit different in how we produced them, but on The Voice, I would be at all the reality shoots and all the stage shows, and then I would basically direct the coaches onto what they're doing today. What we're the blind auditions are very legit. They have no idea who's coming out. And so they would be prepped only to be reminded, ask them where they're from and who, what kind of music they want to do, what genre, what coaching, all that stuff is real. Once they pick their teams, then you're working with them hand in hand. So you're trying to figure out if it's a rehearsal session, what does the singer want to get out of their rehearsal time with the coach? And so we would know that in advance, and we would go prep the coaches. Say, hey, Tori's coming in today, and she's really concerned about the pitch or the song or the tempo or whatever it is, or she hasn't done something slow yet. She wants to make sure she hits notes, like have a moment. So we would make sure that both sides of that equation understood what the goal was for the rehearsal session without ruining it for the audience. So that way they can ask real questions. They'd be prepped to be able to talk to their coach, the coach be able to prep to talk to their singer, but it was never done in a way that everyone knew what was going to happen. It was done so you can get a real organic moment on camera. And so in that respect, you really want to know what everybody wants out of these moments. So yeah, you're working with both sides, the talent and the artist.
Now, so you're talking about that when they meet with the coach. I mean, I think of it in business terms, right? I mean, it's just like having a coach or mentor. You meet with them and they help you
Yeah.
with something. So, are they actually meeting? Like, how long do they meet with the artist?
On The Voice, it used to be like 30 to 45 minutes per person. I don't know. I haven't been on the show for a while, but I don't know what they're doing. It's enough. They're only working on one song. You spend 30 minutes working on a 2-minute song. That's a lot of time. That's all they have to worry about. So back then, they would have enough time to really get into it if they wanted to make changes. And some singers came in totally prepared. Sometimes they would run it like 2 or 3 times and they were done.
Yeah. And then so when they're actually like choosing whose team they're on, or who, who their coach is that like, did they each have to have, I've always wondered this when I watch The Voice, do they each have to have a certain amount of artist that they're working with? Do you try to keep it even, or is it full on legit, like who they're choosing?
Well, the coaches, yeah, I mean, back when I was there, I think they would have 8 people on a team.
Mhm.
So they would have to fill their team up. And yeah, so they always had to have equal numbers. But they could choose any genre, they never knew who they were getting, right? They didn't know what age they were, they didn't know how old they were. So once they turn around, they choose them for their team. Yeah, they would just have to fill the teams up.
That makes sense. Okay, so you've seen a lot of people, their lives just like completely go from this over here to completely change after the show. What is one like really cool moment that you remember of seeing an artist go from like A to Z?
Well, it's cool, but it didn't work out for the show. I mean, we had Morgan Wallen on The
That's
Voice,
pretty awesome.
and he got eliminated. So probably the best
Shoot.
thing that ever happened to Morgan Wallen.
Yeah.
But that's probably the coolest story because like he was on, I think he was 19. He was on the show and he didn't make it. I don't think he made it past the second round, the battles. And he wasn't even on Blake's team. So that's pretty cool. Um,
That's a
there
pretty cool
was
moment.
yeah, but sadly that show doesn't get to claim his victory.
Hmm.
But it's pretty cool to see like, oh, we had him on before he became the Morgan Wallen everyone knows.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of a bummer that he did get eliminated. It's kind of funny, but it's interesting to hear all the artist stories, right? I mean, do you
Yeah.
ever get to give these artists like pep talks behind the scenes where it's like, hey,
Yeah, all the time. I mean,
mhm,
the road even more because the
yeah,
road we started with 12 singers. We didn't start like The Voice, has like 48. And
right.
at that point, it just becomes a volume of like you don't really get to know them until they really start getting eliminated. Because there's
Yeah.
just too many of them. But the road we started with 12. And the idea of that show was there was no audition episode. It was we've already handpicked the very best people we could find. And so that was with Taylor Sheridan's team and Blake's team. And everyone was sort of like using their contacts in the industry to find the best up and coming performers and songwriters because everyone on the road had to sing an original song every week. And so it was a very different idea of like, you better have like pretty much an album's worth of really good songs. And in some cases, you almost want them to have an album's worth of singles
Yeah.
because you don't get to play the filler on our show because you got it might mean you get eliminated. So we really 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 tried to find incredibly talented, well, I think we did find incredibly talented people who were able to bring that experience. And then the other thing is we wanted to make sure that these people could perform and play to rooms because if your audience has seen the show hopefully they were really opening for Keith Urban, so no one came to see any of our singers on the road. They came to see a Keith Urban show. And so just that was the big idea of the show, which is like, hey, they didn't come to see you, so you better kick some ass because they can go to the bathroom, they could go to the bar. All the venues are real, all the fans are real, and it's not a knock on any show. But we weren't shooting on a soundstage in Hollywood where you've come to see a television taping and you're there for the duration. If you didn't like what you were seeing, we couldn't keep you from leaving the venue. We played the Bomb Factory. You're in Dallas, or you're in Fort Worth? Where you at?
Dallas. Yeah, just north
Dallas.
of
So we
Dallas.
played the Bomb Factory in Dallas,
Yeah.
and we couldn't stop someone from if they wanted to leave, they could leave. So, our whole thing was like they better be really good because they got to perform. And then obviously they were coming for Keith. So most people were staying anyway, but they could certainly walk away and go to the bar and hang out. So the
So
goal
how
was to
did
find the best people we could.
I mean, you guys did amazing. And now talking to a lot of them and having them on the show, actually, Cody just reached out to me today and he's like, let's do an interview. And I'm like, dude, I heard you were like the funniest one on the show. So let's bring the humor on Talk Y'all to me. But it's cool, like just hearing their stories too, like having
Mhm.
them on Talk Y'all. And you guys have really done an excellent job with that cast. I mean, just even watching the show and doing the Tory takes was so much fun. Um, I mean, also, I'm just obsessed with all things country music. But it was really cool because they were super real, very
Yeah.
genuine people, have amazing stories and the variety of stories too. That was it was amazing. So I kind of want to, some of these people, I'm assuming if you're listening to Talk Y'all to me by now, that you have heard a lot about the road, what we're talking about. But in case you don't know what we're talking about, Lee, can you just give them like a super quick
Sure.
overview of what the road was, and then also describe to us like the concert. Like they would purchase a ticket to go see Keith Urban, and then they would just be like, "Surprise! You also get all of these other opening acts too."
Not quite.
Okay.
So the idea of the show on the road is you are the opening act for Keith Urban. We found 12 up and coming singers. Some people were veterans of the business. Some people have written number ones for other people, but they were all really talented artists. And every week you're going to watch them perform cover and original while they're opening up for Keith Urban. And then the audience in the room, Keith Urban's fans, would decide who the top three were. I'm sorry, who the bottom three were. They would decide the top two, but who the bottom three were. And then from that pool, Keith would have to determine, sometimes with Blake's help, if Blake was there, or we had Karen Fairchild, we had the Brothers Osborne as guests when Blake was on tour, because we shot it while he was touring. So whoever was there to help consult with Keith, and then Keith would have to decide who really who his fan base would like. The show is about really winning over Keith Urban's fan base, and then hopefully, if you stick it out long enough, you get to the end of the show where we shot the Ryman. But we looked at it like the prize is already yours. You've already won. You're already on tour. You're going to play for 10 or 12,000 fans who hopefully will go out and support your music by being original and not just seeing you play covers. So that was the concept of the show. And as far as how we got people there, the tickets were free. So hopefully we get to do it again and your audience can like sign up. But
Yes.
what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to become concert promoters. Okay. And not to get in the weeds, but if we're selling tickets, now we're concert promoters. It was a whole nother ball of wax, which we didn't want to get into that. We just wanted people to come to the show. And so we were like, okay, we need a headliner that will be a draw, who's going to be awesome, who understands how to do this. Keith was like on such a short list, you have no idea. Blake and I were over the moon when he was like, yeah, I'll do it. We're like, oh my God, perfect. We don't have to train you how to do a show. But we
Right.
were psyched about Cat, and he's an incredible performer. If you haven't seen him, it's unbelievable. And I was psyched because I'm a fan anyway. So I got to see like a front row or side stage, like 10 concerts over the course of shooting. So that was awesome. But yeah, people got a chance to come to the show for free. And we let a certain amount of people vote. So we had voting devices. So we did a cross section of the audience. We didn't have some rooms were 12 or 1,700 people. So we limited it to where we would get a good average of the vote. But some people got to choose to have a voting device. But yeah, that's how it worked.
Hey y'all, quick pause for something important. If you're connecting with this conversation, you will love my new book, Unexpected. It's filled with the stories, lessons, and mindset shifts that helped me grow through some of the toughest and, quite frankly, most unexpected seasons of my life. My hope is that it inspires you to keep going even when the path doesn't look the way you imagined. You can get your copy now at torikruse.com. Now, let's jump back into the episode. is there anything that like goes on behind the scenes that country fans who are listening, or just really any fans of like reality TV shows would be surprised to know?
The way we did the show, because the tour was real, and we played, even though the show aired every week, we actually shot the whole show over the course of a month. And so we were on the road for 4 weeks doing this tour. And maybe what's a little crazy about how we did it, all of the singers had to rehearse with the house band before we left to go on tour. So that band had to learn about 120 songs.
Wow.
So the band had to learn about half of the run because once we started the tour, there wasn't enough time to rehearse everybody every day. And so we asked the singers to like pick your top 10 originals, pick your top 10 covers. What do you want to do? What do you think you want to do? Have the band learn that entire set list or about 50% of it before we ever left. So we did rehearsals for a couple of weeks before we hit the road. Once we hit the road, as people started getting eliminated, we had a little bit more time at sound check. We would always try and have at least one day of rehearsal with the band in each city with the singers to refresh where they were and if they had anything they wanted to change as they learned how the show was working. But that was probably the craziest part. You know, it's always nerve-wracking when you do these shows. Like the band was unbelievable, and it's as the executive producer show, you're always nervous. Like, what if the band doesn't have enough time to learn all this stuff, and then we get on the road and but it worked out incredibly well. But that was pretty crazy. And then other than that, we averaged about 3 to 4 days in between each city. And so, it really felt like a real tour. We were moving pretty quick, and we had a 140 person crew. And
Wow.
so, yeah, we had it was like a real concert
That's a
tour.
lot.
We had lighting, sound. Because we're not only making a concert, we're filming a television show. So we had about 15 cameras at each venue, and then we were shooting the documentary footage behind the scenes. We had drones, we're doing bus days. We had two buses so we could do exteriors and interiors at the same time. It was a very, very big production.
How do you keep your energy up and your mindset focused? I mean, you're also away from your family during this time. Like, how do you do it?
I drink a lot of coffee during the day, and then my fair share of bourbon at night. But a lot of coffee. That's the biggest. I would show up on set and like, "Where's the coffee?" And there would be days where it wasn't there yet, and I was like, "No, this is not going to work." But well, look, I mean, first of all, there's a lot at stake for me. I created the show with Blake, and then we brought in Taylor Sheridan, 101 Studios, and they partnered with us, which was awesome. But so just from a personal standpoint, right? Like I can't screw it up. That's number one. So, and then Blake's my partner, so it's like his name's on it. At the end of the day, if it was a total debacle, no one's coming after me. It's like his fault. So yeah, I've got that on pressure, but first of all, it's fun, right? Like I don't ever, like some days could be 12 or 14 hours. It doesn't feel like that. And I've never had a job. I've never worked in an office. So this is all I know. So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we're going to go do this thing. So fortunate that my crew's been with me for probably some guys have been with me for like 20 years. My AD, Jay Ostrowski, and our audio soup, Kenyatta Westbrook, and like some of our cameramen, our editors. So some of these guys and my producers, we've been doing this for so long together that it's kind of like my second family. So I get to go out on the road with like some of my best friends and
That's so
then
cool.
go make this thing. So you're supported by a huge, support system. And the network was there for most of the episodes. And they were supported. So it was just a whole world of like, we're gonna create the best environment we can to go take this thing out on the road.
You obviously are extremely passionate about what you do too, and I'm sure there's been a lot of challenges as well, but it sounds like it's been really life-giving as well. And it reminds me when I was actually competing at Miss USA because it's way shorter than this. It was only 10 days. But,
Wow.
the whole production, the whole team and, you know, just the production of it all. I mean, it's very exhausting, but it's also, and I was on a different side than the production, but it's also so exhilarating because you're so passionate about something. And so I just hear it in your voice. I hear it from your experiences, how passionate you are about it. So as far as your team specifically goes, will you take your team and then now go to create another documentary or show from here? How does that work?
So almost all those guys that I named, and then there's so many more. A guy named Keith Donnelly was an EP on the show with us as well. We did Barmageddon together, which we should talk about that if you have a sec, because that was crazy.
Let's do it.
So we shot Barmageddon, and these guys did that with me. We've done all these guys were on The Voice. They're on a show called Rockstar. We all did Contender, Celebrity Apprentice. So it's like a traveling circus. We just go from show to show. And it's a lot of fun because at least the other thing is it makes my job easier because everyone has their own responsibility and I never have to look over anyone's shoulder. I get to go do my job knowing that they're going to do theirs. And that's huge. I don't care what you do for a living, right? If you don't have a good support system, it makes it harder for you to do your job. And so having these guys around us and girls out there on the road and in the field and then back and at it, I know I can count on them so I can focus on worrying about just the higher level things or just the performance or the look. At the end of the day, all that's happening behind the scene doesn't matter. The audience doesn't see it. All that matters is what gets recorded and what goes on the screen. So that's where the focus is when we're making these things.
How do you determine what goes on the screen?
Well, there's a lot of editors. There's a lot of people weigh in. It's a process. There's a notes process that goes along with it. And so you make your cut that you think is the way to go, and then you send it to like Blake would chime in and give notes. Taylor Sheridan would give notes. Taylor's team would give notes. CBS would give notes, and eventually you get a version where you've run out of time and it's got to go on the air. That's sort of the short version of it.
Is that for most shows or just the road?
The road had more people involved than I'm used to because there were so many partners on it, like 101 and like I said, Taylor and me and Blake were doing this, and so there was a lot of people involved. But yeah, most shows the process is pretty similar. You do your cut, you give it to the network notes it, you note it, you go back and forth until everyone sort of agrees that you've got a version that's ready to go on the air,
Right.
or
Okay.
you run out of money.
Or one of the two.
Yeah,
Run out of time or money. Sounds
pretty
about
much. Yeah.
right. All right. You mentioned Blake Shelton quite a few times, and I think all of the listeners here on Talk Y'all to Me would disown me if I did not ask a question about Blake Shelton. So tell us something funny about Blake, or maybe something completely unexpected, because I think that Blake Shelton is pretty real
Yeah.
when it comes to all external, like his social media or in the limelight. Like, I feel like that's genuinely who he is. But is there something funny or different about Blake that you can tell us?
I think your audience already knows he's funny. Um, I'll tell you how, which is kind of funny, how Barmageddon came about, which is it started with a conversation at the tail end of the pandemic. Blake and Carson probably had a drink or two. We're sitting around the set of The Voice, and they called me up. I said, "Hey, we have an idea for a show." And I said, "Okay, what do you guys want to do?" And they said they were so excited. They had it figured out. They're like, "Blake is going to become a professional cornhole player." And I was like, "What am I watching after the first 10 minutes?" Because I was like, what do we do with that? And so I came back and said, you know what if we did like the Bar Olympics? And that then turned into Barmageddon. But I would just say, like, just as an aside, like, that's how Blake thinks. Like, this will be fun to do. We can make a whole show out of that. But no, I mean, listen, he's as genuine as it gets. I've been around long enough to, I wouldn't want to have a company or be a partner with someone who wasn't that. This business is hard enough when you're working with people who maybe aren't sincere. So I think for your audience, he's the real deal. I mean, you can't, like, when you're on TV as much as him, there's a lot of performers who don't do TV, and so you don't really get a sense of who their personality is. A lot of artists, but I think you saw him on The Voice for 12 years. You can't fake sincerity and genuine authenticity that long. Eventually, your true colors come out. So I think everyone already knows who he is. He's a really good dude, very dependable, just authentically interested in what he's doing. And if he's not, he doesn't do it. And so we're pretty picky about what we try and develop as a company now and what we're trying to make. So that way his name isn't going to go on something that he's got to pretend he's interested in doing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's huge. And all right, thanks for that. We had to cover that because we
Yeah,
have some
totally.
Blake fans on here. We have all country music fans on here, but Blake Shelton's obviously one of the best of the best. What is coming up next for you? You've done so many incredible things in your career. I can't wait to hear what you have coming up.
We have a scripted show that we sold to Amazon called Dorothy, which was announced, and that is sort of it's based on the Wizard of Oz, but there's no magic, and that's with Gwen Stefani as well, who's not part of the company, but she came on board and she heard the pitch, and so that particular project we're waiting for the first script to come in right now, and that Dorothy's an inspiring songwriter goes to big city to try and make it, and she meets all the character tropes from Wizard of Oz, but she lives in the world of music. So we've got that. As I meant, I don't know if we were already rolling it. So we're doing a Keith Whitley documentary. So far we've interviews with Vince Gill and Lainey Wilson and Lori Morgan, and Lori's an executive producer on, I believe, as well, and she's part of this process. So that's been great. And we've been talking to Jesse Whitley and everyone who was in the orbit with Keith when he was alive, and then people who've been influenced by Keith. We have another doc that I can't announce yet, but also takes place in the music space. And we've got some scripted shows as well that we're out with and we're developing. And then hopefully we'll get to announce a movie or two here in the next few months. So we're trying to cover all the bases. We're docs, reality shows, and then also scripted.
Which one is your favorite one to produce?
Uh, Well, there's something not announced that I'm super psyched about that I'm hoping we can get it squared away. Once that's done, I'll call you up and we'll talk
Okay.
about it. The stuff that we have that we're working on behind the scenes is super exciting because it's bigger than anything we've done yet. And then we're always looking for ideas. And the idea is really to make shows and any project for the flyover states for Blake's fans. And I know there's more and more of that coming out, but we still feel pretty passionately that it's still a largely ignored audience. And so we want to make sure that we're making those shows and making things for people to watch. And at the same time, be something that the coastal states and everybody will be entertained by. Like Barmageddon's a good example of that was not, even though we shot it in Nashville on purpose because we wanted to feel authentic again, but we wanted to make sure it was something everyone could have a good time watching. Same thing with The Road. Like, I don't think you had to be a country music fan to enjoy The Road, but I think if you were, it's better. But we tried to make it so it's just a fun show, and if you like music, you get a chance to watch it and see how it all comes together.
It was awesome. I absolutely loved it, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of the shows that you are producing. You mentioned the flyover states, and I'm originally born and raised in Iowa, so the country music, that whole it runs deep because I'm from Iowa, and also that's like our heart behind Talk Y'all to Me as well. Is just like let's spread these messages to the fans and the individuals watching that are in these flyover states that you're talking about with like Blake's audience as well. So, but these shows that you're producing are extremely relatable. I'm excited to see what's coming up, and I just appreciate you coming on Talk Y'all to Me and peeling back the curtain with me about all of these different sort of reality and reality shows in music industry.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks for tuning in to Talk Y'all to Me. If this episode encouraged you or reminded you of your calling, share it with someone who needs that same reminder today. Hit the follow button to subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and come hang out with me on social at official Tori Kruse. Keep shining, stay faithful, and keep talking, y'all.